The rain had started just as I pulled into the driveway, light at first, a hush against the windshield, then harder, like something urgent had shifted in the sky. Her porch light flickered once, then held steady. That was the first thing I noticed about her house. Everything felt like it had been holding on just long enough. I killed the engine and sat for a second, fingers resting on the steering wheel. The message she left was still fresh in my head. "Ryan, it's Marissa, Aaron's mom. I wouldn't normally ask, but there's something in the basement. An animal. I can't do this alone." She hadn't said much more. Just that her son, my best friend since college, was gone for the weekend, and the noises had started the night before. She sounded tired. Not just tired like she hadn't slept, but tired in her bones. I stepped out into the rain. The porch light threw shadows across the wood as I approached. Before I could knock, the door cracked open. Marissa stood there, hair twisted up in a loose knot, sleeves of an old flannel rolled past her elbows. There was something unreadable in her expression, half embarrassment, half relief. "I didn't know who else to call," she said, managing a small smile. "It's fine," I replied, brushing water from my jacket. "You said it's in the basement?" She nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The warmth of the house hit me first, heat radiating from the vents, the scent of something citrus in the air, maybe cleaning spray or a candle long since extinguished. "I haven't gone down there," she admitted. "Whatever it is, it's loud." I followed her through the kitchen, past a dining room where a single chair had been pulled out and left abandoned. She paused at the basement door and turned. "You don't have to actually go down if I've got it," I said, offering a reassuring nod. She handed me a flashlight and a pair of thick gloves. "Be careful," she said. "I don't need 2 emergencies in one night." Her voice tried for lightness but cracked at the edges. The basement was colder, the air stale like unopened boxes. I moved slow, beam of light catching corners and shelves and things long forgotten. The noise came again, a sharp rustle behind a shelving unit. A raccoon, hunched and cornered. Its eyes met mine, wide and feral. I didn't make a sound. It took about 10 minutes, some gentle coaxing, a cracked window, and the right angle to guide it out. When it was gone, the silence that followed was thick and satisfying. I came up covered in dust, smudged across my hoodie, gloves streaked with dirt. She was waiting by the back door, a glass of lemonade in her hands. "You're a miracle worker," she said, handing it over. I took it, nodding toward the rain beyond the glass. "Didn't expect to become an urban wildlife expert tonight." She laughed, soft, genuine. "I owe you." "It's nothing," I replied, but the way she looked at me said otherwise. We stood there, 2 people with rain at our backs and something unnamed between us. The kind of pause that isn't just quiet, it's loaded, stretched taut by things neither of us knew yet. But I felt it. Marissa tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Stay a bit?" "I was going to make soup." "It's the least I can do." I could have left. Said thanks and goodbye and headed into the night. But something made me nod. "Sure," I said. "I've got time." And just like that, the storm wasn't the only thing that had started. The rain had stopped by the time we sat at the small kitchen table, the kind with worn corners and a single ceramic bowl at its center, filled with lemons that looked like they belonged to another season. The soup was simmering, quiet on the stovetop, the aroma of garlic and thyme winding its way through the house like it knew where to go. Marissa moved like someone who used to be busy, effortlessly efficient, no wasted motion, but with a kind of practiced solitude, like everything had been done alone for too long. She rinsed vegetables under warm water, rolled her sleeves higher, and nodded toward the chair across from her. "Sit," she said. "You've earned a break." I did. My legs felt sore from crouching in the basement, but it wasn't the physical exhaustion that hit me. It was the stillness. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, it feels observed. "So," she began, chopping carrots, "how's the bookstore job going?" "Still surrounded by cranky college kids and dusty romance novels?" I smiled. Pretty much. Although the romance novels tend to have the least dust. She chuckled, a real one this time, sharp and sudden. Figures. Her laugh caught me off guard. Not because it was unexpected, but because it made something shift in the room, a lightness, a ripple of something warm in the center of all that evening hush. Aaron never reads, she said, stirring the pot absently. Unless it's on a screen. I always hoped one of his friends might rub off on him. I tried, I said. He told me once that books don't do anything. I nearly disowned him on the spot. Sounds like him, she said with a sigh, her smile fading into something softer. He's gotten more distant lately. I blame college. And that girlfriend. What's her name again? Jenna, I offered. They've been rocky for a while. He doesn't talk about it much, though. She nodded, then paused like she was listening to a noise only she could hear. I remember being that age. Everything felt urgent. Like if you didn't make the right choice at 21, the whole world would collapse. Has it? She looked over at me, a flash of amusement in her eyes. Define collapse. We both laughed this time, and I noticed the way her shoulders eased. There was something in the room now, less guarded, more alive. She ladled soup into mismatched bowls and brought them over. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Not awkward, just present. I never really asked, she said eventually, but how are your parents? You mentioned your mom once, I think. I looked down at my spoon. She passed when I was little. 6. My dad, well, he's around. Not really the talking type. I'm sorry, she said, gently. It's okay. You get used to quiet people. Eventually, you start answering your own questions out loud just to fill the space. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she reached over and touched my wrist, not a grab, not a hold. Just contact. Just warmth. I get that, she said quietly. After my husband died, the silence was unbearable. I'd turn the TV on just to pretend someone was home. How long's it been? 4 years this March. I nodded, not because I knew what to say, but because sometimes people don't need words, they just need someone to stay in the room. Her hand drifted back, slowly. The soup cooled. The clock ticked somewhere behind us. And then she said it, almost like she didn't mean to. It's nice, you know. Having someone here again. Even if it's just for soup and pest control. I smiled, but there was a weight in my chest I hadn't expected. I'm glad I came. Outside, the street was slick with rain, glistening like a memory. The air inside smelled like rosemary and old wood. She poured us both a glass of wine, red, bold, and we moved to the living room, the couch sighing as we sank into it. The lights were low. The shadows taller. We didn't say much after that. But the space between us wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. I hadn't meant for it to become routine. But somehow, between a broken cabinet door and a slow-cooked lasagna, it did. I'd stop by to help with something, and she'd offer me dinner. I'd linger just a bit longer each time, until night crept up and the porch light clicked on without us noticing. Aaron was still out of town. Ski trip turned into a friend's birthday trip, then a detour to his girlfriend's cabin. Marissa and I didn't talk about him much. We didn't talk about anything directly, really. Just sidelong truths, left between the lines. The shift didn't happen during some cinematic thunderstorm or dramatic confession. It happened in the attic. She'd asked me to help her bring down some of her daughter's boxes. Melanie's old things, textbooks, photos, a pink volleyball with faded signatures. We passed them down the rickety pull-down ladder, one by one, sun filtering in through a tiny attic window. The dust in the air looked like static. Everything felt suspended. The last box slipped. She caught it, barely, but twisted her wrist in the process. I dropped the others and reached for her instinctively. You okay? I asked, hand on her elbow. She nodded, laughing a little too fast. I'm fine. Just, ugh. Getting old. You're not old, I said. She looked at me then. No smirk. No laugh. Just looked. I don't know if she leaned in or I did. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe gravity did the work. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't desperate. It was quiet, like the first drop of rain before a storm that you already know will drench everything. Her hand moved to my jaw, fingers slow, unsure. Mine curled around her waist, her spine arched into my touch like she'd forgotten what it felt like to be held without caution. And then she pulled back, breath shallow, her forehead resting against mine. This is a mistake, she whispered. I should have agreed. I should have stood up, walked down that ladder, and left it at that. Instead, I whispered, then why does it feel like the opposite? We didn't go any further that day. The kiss was the line. And we both stepped back from it, but not away. The next morning, I woke up thinking about her hand in mine. Not in a fantasy way. In a real, almost domestic way. Like it had already happened 100 times before. And that scared me. That week, I stayed away. I told myself I needed space. Told myself I was doing the right thing. But none of it felt right. Until Thursday. She texted around 6. Aaron's out with friends. I made too much dinner again. Just saying. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I went. The living room smelled like basil and something buttery. Music played low, some acoustic jazz, the kind without lyrics. She opened the door before I knocked. Her eyes held a question. I answered it with a step forward. We didn't talk for a while. The food went cold on the table. Her back hit the wall, and my hands found her like they'd always been meant to. Every motion was slow, careful, like we were trying to memorize the shape of this boundary we were choosing to cross. Later, lying tangled on the living room floor, bare skin against cotton rug, the ceiling fan spinning in slow, patient circles, she said, I don't know what this is. Neither do I admitted. But it doesn't feel wrong. She was quiet for a while. Then, it doesn't feel safe either. And just like that, the warmth between us flickered, a candle caught in a sudden breeze. Not extinguished, just warmed. That was the night everything changed. Not because we slept together. But because we chose to. With full knowledge of the line we crossed. It wasn't lust. It was need. And it came with a price. We just hadn't paid it yet. There was no going back after that night. Not really. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. The way she poured my coffee the next morning, silent, soft, like she was afraid it might echo too loudly, told me everything. We had crossed something sacred. Something irreversible. And now we were standing in it, quietly pretending the floor beneath us wasn't cracking. Aaron came back that weekend. His voice boomed through the hallway like it always had, carefree, heavy with inside jokes and music playlists. I saw him 2 days later at our usual sandwich spot. He asked if I wanted to crash at his place for a movie night. Said his mom had made pasta. She's been cooking more lately, he said, mouth full. Must be bored out of her mind. I smiled. I chewed. I swallowed guilt like a mouthful of glass. That night, I stood in their kitchen again. Everything looked the same, the framed family photo on the fridge, the herb planter on the windowsill. Marissa moved differently now. Slower. Quieter. She barely looked at me as she passed plates across the table, like we were strangers orbiting the same room. But her hand brushed mine as she took the salad bowl. Just for a second. Just enough. After dinner, Aaron headed upstairs to game. I helped her load the dishwasher. Our hands bumped over a fork. Neither of us flinched. I don't know if I can keep doing this, she whispered, not looking at me. I know, I said. But I didn't stop coming. The pressure crept in like a slow fog, one that wraps around your ankles before you realize you're drowning in it. She started pulling back. Not completely. Just enough to keep things manageable. Her texts came shorter. Her smiles more rare. And yet, she still left the porch light on. I started arriving earlier. Aaron had morning classes. Sometimes he'd be out for a run. She'd meet me at the door in her robe, hair still damp from the shower. We didn't say much. But what we didn't say filled the entire house. One morning, I stayed too long. We'd been slow to part, lazy kisses, soft laughter, the kind of intimacy that felt almost normal. I was still putting on my shoes when she stiffened at the sound of tires on gravel. "Shit," she whispered. "He's back early." There wasn't time to slip out the front. I darted through the laundry room, heart hammering, and ducked out the back, just as Aaron's keys jangled in the lock. I crouched behind the hedges, barely breathing. He walked in whistling, carrying a bag of garden soil, completely unaware of the man hiding 5 feet from his kitchen. That moment stayed lodged in my throat for days. When she called that night, her voice was quiet. Brittle. "I can't do this, Ryan." "You don't mean that." "I do. I have to." I didn't argue. I knew it was coming. The universe was tightening around us like a vice, and sooner or later, something would break. She didn't end it. Not directly. But everything changed after that call. The touches disappeared. The tension didn't. If anything, it grew, louder, heavier, unbearable. I found myself pacing before going over, checking the street twice, inventing excuses to be there. Helping fix a lock. Dropping off a book. Nothing that made sense anymore. We were crumbling, slowly. And then came the text that made it real. "Aaron's taking a break from school. He'll be home more." 12 words. That's all it took to push everything off balance. I didn't respond. Not right away. Because I knew what she wasn't saying. This wasn't a pause. It was the beginning of the end. And somehow, knowing that made me want to see her even more. I showed up the next day, unannounced. Her eyes were red. She didn't speak. Just stepped aside and let me in. We didn't touch. Didn't kiss. Just stood there, two people suspended between what they had and what they couldn't keep. "I hate this," she said. "I know." And for the first time, I believed her. It happened on a Wednesday. Late afternoon, when the light outside was too golden to feel dangerous. When the house was too quiet to sense what was coming. I dropped by under the usual pretense, some forgotten book Aaron had asked for, a quick visit, nothing more. That's what we told ourselves now. That every reason still made sense. Marissa answered the door with a folded dish towel in one hand, the smell of roasted garlic trailing behind her. "He's out grabbing groceries," she said, voice flat. "You shouldn't stay long." I nodded. But I didn't leave. We stood in the hallway like ghosts of our former selves, close enough to feel it, too distant to reach. Her eyes held something they hadn't before. Not warmth. Not even guilt. Just fatigue. "I had a dream about you last night," she said, suddenly. "You were younger. Like, younger, 16 maybe. Sitting at my kitchen table, telling me about how you wanted to be a writer. I was making pancakes. I didn't know what to do with that. The image sat between us like a misplaced memory. "I never wanted to be a writer," I said softly. "I know," she whispered. "But in the dream, you did. And I believed you." A pause. Heavy. Suspended. She reached up to smooth a wrinkle in my shirt collar. Her fingers hesitated there, hovering against my chest like they didn't know what to do anymore. "Ryan," she said, finally looking me full in the face, "what are we doing?" I wanted to answer. To say something poetic or brave. But all that came out was the truth. I think we were both just lonely. She blinked, like that hurt more than anything else I could have said. Lonely doesn't mean wrong, I added, too late. Yes, it does, she said. Eventually. I could feel it cracking beneath us. The entire illusion. This thing we'd built, not out of lust, but out of need. Out of the way she looked at me like I was someone she'd forgotten how to be. Out of the way I felt more alive in her silence than I ever did in rooms full of people my age. We can't keep pretending Aaron won't notice, she said. That this house isn't echoing louder every time you walk through the door. I stepped closer. I know. And I can't be the reason my son loses his friend. You're not, I said, but the words felt cheap. I already am, she whispered. The front door creaked suddenly, a gust of wind, a shift in pressure. We both jumped, startled by how much tension was wrapped around such an ordinary sound. That was the moment I knew it was over. Not because we said so, but because there was nothing left to protect it with. I thought maybe we could outrun it, she said quietly. Hide between the cracks. I looked at her then, not like a woman I loved, not like a fantasy, but like a person I was about to lose. The kind of loss you can't mark with a date or a funeral. The kind of loss that just lives inside you. I don't regret any of it, I said. She smiled, but it was broken. That's the hardest part, isn't it? She walked to the kitchen and returned with a small jar, glass, honey-colored. It's from the market, she said. Local. You mentioned you liked it. I took it from her hands. Our fingers touched, but there was no pull this time. No flicker. Just a stillness that said this is goodbye. If you ever pass by, she said, her voice nearly gone, wave. I will. She opened the door for me. The sun had started setting, throwing long shadows across the driveway. I stepped outside, jar in hand, heart heavier than I could carry. And she didn't watch me leave. But I knew she was standing there, just on the other side of the door, counting the seconds it took for the silence to return. I didn't see her for weeks after that. Not in person, anyway. Sometimes, I'd drive past her street on the way to nowhere in particular, windows down, music low, wondering if the porch light still turned on at 7. I never stopped. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure who I'd be to her now if I did. The jar of honey sat unopened on my shelf. I didn't touch it. Just looked at it sometimes, like it might still be warm if I held it long enough. That's the thing about endings, they rarely come clean. No dramatic exit. No final word. Just slow withdrawal, like color fading from an old photograph. Aaron and I drifted, too. Not all at once, but gradually. He stopped texting as much. I stopped making excuses to come over. We didn't fight. We just thinned. Like breath on glass. He once asked, casually, if things felt different. You and my mom used to talk more, he said. I think she liked having you around. I shrugged. Life gets busy. He nodded, not convinced, but too tired to push. He'd started working part-time at a bike shop and was talking about applying to schools again, out of state, this time. Maybe that was what she'd been waiting for. Maybe she needed him to go so she could come back to herself. And maybe I needed to go so I could do the same. I started picking up weekend shifts at the bookstore, then weeknights too. The space helped. I read more. Talked less. Said yes to things I would have avoided before, hikes, gallery shows, even a date or two. Nothing stuck. But I was trying. One Saturday in early spring, I saw her. I was walking out of the market, arms full of coffee and magazines I didn't need. She was across the parking lot, her hair swept up in a clip, wearing a soft green scarf I remembered folding once across her shoulders. Aaron was with her, pushing the cart, laughing at something. Something light. Something normal. She turned, mid-laugh, and saw me. There was a beat. A breath. She didn't stop. Didn't wave. But her eyes lingered just long enough to tell me she'd seen me too. That was all. That night, I opened the jar. The honey was thick, slow, golden. I dipped a spoon in, let it trail like syrup onto a slice of bread. It tasted like wildflowers and earth, like something small and real and temporary. Like memory. Like her. Sometimes, in the quiet, I still think about the sound of her laugh in that attic. Or the way her hands moved when she talked, carving invisible shapes into the air. I think about how I never said goodbye. How she never asked me to. But the story didn't need it. Some people come into your life like a season. They bloom, they burn, they pass. But the scent lingers in the fabric, long after you've folded it away. I never became someone who needed to explain what happened. Not to Aaron. Not to anyone. But on the days when the light hits just right through the bookstore windows, when the music playing sounds like that soft jazz she loved, I remember what it felt like to be seen completely, for a little while, and to see someone back, before the world caught up. And sometimes, when I pass that house and catch a glimpse of her on the porch, reading, or pruning herbs or just existing quietly, I still wave. She never waves first. But once in a while, she does wave back. And somehow, that's enough.